Hello, everyone. Let me start this episode with a small story. A 22-year-old engineering graduate. He spent 4 years in college and lakhs in fee. Campus placement didn't work out for him. Today, he drives Uber in Hyderabad. As uncomfortable as this story may sound, this is the story of my Uber driver last week. He works 12 hours a day, 6 days a week to earn 25 to 30,000 a month. There's nothing wrong with an honest days of work, but the real question is this what college is preparing him for? And more importantly, do you think this is an isolated incident or is this the new reality? In a survey conducted in 2026 of over 4,000 gig workers, we found out that 15% of them were graduates, 2% were postgraduates. So the answer to the question is yes, more and more graduates are turning to gig work for employment. This is not a new phenomena. Only in 2016, 10 years ago, 40% of graduates were applying for blue collar roles. Why? Simply, there weren't any white collar jobs available. 40% of graduates under the age of 25 are unemployed today. Only 7% are able to find stable job after college. What are the options for the rest? Be it freelancing, contractual work, or gig work. So the question we need to ask is why, despite being highly educated, despite respecting and even worshipping education, why is there such a huge disconnect between employment and it's not job crisis, it's not education crisis. It's just a fundamental disconnect between what is being taught in college and what is required in real world. To dig deep into this topic, let's jump into the episode. Now, before we dig deep into the current crisis, let's acknowledge something first. India has done something remarkable. India has achieved near 100% elementary school enrollment. More children are in classroom than ever before in our history. India has also achieved 28% gross enrollment ratio for college. That's up from 24% just a decade ago. On the surface level, it looks like a success story, and it is. Only in last 40 years, absolute poverty rate has fallen from 50% to 5%. Only in last 20 years, 400 million people have been moved out of poverty. So yes, it is a success story. But there's also another layer to it, another nuance of my era. Part of the success has also been powered because of something else. India's ability to provide skilled talent across the world. Today, Indians work all across the world, be it US, be it Europe, be it Middle East, be it Australia, Canada, you name it. Not just that. India sent 135 billion in remittance last year. India is number one when it comes to remittance. It's as high as the next three countries combined. So, yes, it is a success story. To put that into context, that's 3.5% of our GDP. Now, this money is not just supporting our families, they're also stabilizing the economy and even fund our trade deficit. So, yes, we are producing talent, we are educating millions, we are lifting people out of poverty. That is progress. But here's the contradiction while our education is good enough to supply talent to the world, it's not good enough to create jobs at home. Because if our best minds are building other economies, while graduates at home are struggling to find meaningful work, can we really call that a success? Now, let's jump into the current crisis. Reason number one, our education is still optimized for memory, while the market rewards thinking. To put it simply, our education system still rewards knowledge acquisition, while the market rewards knowledge application. Now, let's look at what students are trained to do. They're trained to memorize concepts, reproduce answers, do well in exams. Now, you compare that with what the real world demands: solve ambiguous problems, communicate ideas clearly, adapt to new situations, make decisions based on incomplete information. Now, if you compare both these, you will know these two are fundamentally different set of skills. And there is where the problem lies. Because our academic model still rewards recalling information far more than applying it to real world situations. Students are trained to get the answers right on paper, but not necessarily solve problems outside the classroom. So, when they enter the workforce, many struggle to translate the theoretical understanding into practical performance. Not because they lack knowledge, and the data reflects the same. Only 42 to 55% of graduates in India are considered employable. That means half of all the graduates are not ready for the jobs they have studied for. Now, here's a deeper insight. This is not primarily a technical skills problem, it's a human skills gap. Graduates often struggle with communication, adaptability, workplace readiness, the very skills that matter the most in a fast changing AI driven world. And that creates a strange paradox. On one hand, we talk about unemployment, and on the other, companies talk about lack of job ready talent in the market. Both are true because this was never about skills gap or supply. It was always about fit. Graduates do not fit into the current employment model. They're not trained for it, not yet at least. Number two, lack of real world exposure. Now, this is where the gap becomes very obvious. Most of our education happens inside a classroom. Students spend year attending lectures, taking notes, preparing for exams, but very little time is spent on working on real problems, interacting with clients, understanding how things actually function at workplace. And this creates a disconnect because this is not about whether student understands the concept. It's about whether they have ever seen these concepts in action. Let's take a simple example. An engineering student might study circuits, systems, theory, coding, but may graduate without ever working on a real client requirement, building something that is actually useful, seeing how decisions are made in real scenarios. So, when they enter the workforce, they don't struggle with concepts. Rather, they struggle with context, as the environment can be overwhelming. Now, let's take the example of Germany, which is one of the highly rated education systems in the world. They follow something called dual learning model, which simply means education does not happen just at one place. It happens in two. Part of the week is spent in classroom learning theory, and the rest of the week is spent inside companies, applying what they learned in real situations. So students don't just study concepts, they see those concepts being used in real life. Now, this enables them to understand how decisions are made, how teams work, what are the expectations of the employer, and most importantly, they learn by doing. They get their hands dirty. Now, because of this, so by the time they graduate, they don't just have knowledge, they have practical understanding of they have experience and have seen that knowledge being put into work. They've already worked on real tasks, they've made mistakes, and they've learned from those mistakes. And that's what it is all about. So by the time they enter the workforce, they're ready to contribute. Now let's compare that with Indian education system. Our model is still largely linear, which basically means you first study and then you work. There is no transition or overlap in between. For years, students focus on classes, lectures, marks, and with very limited exposure to real environments. So by the time they graduate, they don't lack knowledge, they lack context. They haven't seen how decisions are made in real working environment. They haven't worked on real problems. They haven't worked under real expectations because there is no transition phase. The beginning of their career becomes the first real learning phase, not an extension to what they've already learned, but a restart. You can see the difference between both the systems. In one system, there's a transition period between education and employment. So the transition is seamless. And in the other, the model is still linear. There's time for education and then there's time to work. And the time to work, the first few years of employment is where the transition actually happens. So this is not just about skills gap, it's an exposure gap. We are educating students without immersing them in reality. And in today's world, familiarity with real environment is just as important as knowledge itself. Reason number three, skill gap plus the unemployment trap. Now, this is where things get really uncomfortable. India produces millions of graduates every year, but over 50% of them end up in low skilled or semi skilled roles. That's not unemployment, that's underemployment, which means people are working, but not to their true potential. In fact, majority of graduates in India are doing jobs that don't require the kind of education they have. Here is where the real problem begins. If you don't have high demand skills, you compensate it with time, which means more hours, more effort, just to be in the same income bracket. And over time, this creates a cycle because when your income depends on the number of hours you work, you don't have time or the energy to upskill. This is what many economists call a low skilling trap, where poor skills lead to low quality jobs, which leaves no time to build better skills. Because they have to compensate lack of skills with time, they end up working 12 to 14 hours every day. Now, this leaves them with very little time to upskill, often less than 10 hours per week. And because of that, they remain stuck, not because of lack of ambition, but because the system leaves no room for them to improve, because the system leaves no room to grow. And here's the irony: people who do upskill, especially in areas like AI, data, soft skills like communication, sales, or other high demand fields, the income jump can be massive, often from 50% to 400%. So, which means the opportunity does exist, but access to opportunity is still fairly uneven. And part of the problem starts early because many students don't realize this, but graduation is not just to get a degree. It's the best window to build real market relevant skills, especially in low paying, time sensitive jobs. Because once you enter the workforce, especially in low paying, time sensitive jobs, the window starts to close rapidly. And in an AI driven world, the gap will only widen between those who earn based on time and those who earn based on skill. Now, this is what we call the underemployment trap. Reason number four: our system still optimizes for selection, not transformation. Now, this issue is more structural. Our system is very good at selecting talent, but not as effective at developing it at scale. Let's take institutions like IIT for example. They are world class. They produce some of the finest engineers not just in India but across the world. But they serve a very small percentage of Indian students, only 0.5% or even less, which means we are investing enormous efforts in identifying the top performers, but not enough in improving the outcomes for the other 99%. So, excellence does exist, but it is more concentrated, not widespread. Now, you lay this up with something more deeper: a cultural preference. In India, most students are encouraged to choose stable jobs, predictable careers, low risk paths. And to be fair, this is understandable to some degree because we do not have strong safety nets. Failure still carries social and financial consequences. Even though India today has over 2 lakh startups and entrepreneurship is celebrated more than ever before in our history, a large majority of graduates still prefer traditional employment because stability feels safer than uncertainty. And this is not just an observation. Industry leaders have echoed the same sentiment. As Anand Mahindra says, we celebrate toppers, but innovation needs builders who fail forward. And this is the core issue. Our system still rewards correct answers, fixed paths, following instructions, and often discourages experimentation, risk takers, learning through failure. Over time, this shapes behavior. It produces individuals who are excellent at executing given problems, but less comfortable with creating new ones to solve. Or, in simpler terms, we produce more employees than creators. As Narayan Murthy captured this perfectly, education must shift from selection to transformation. And the cultural layer that we talked about makes it even more harder. The stigma around failure pushes graduates to choose safe careers, even if it limits long term growth. And this shows at national level too. India is global leader in services. We provide IT services all across the world. But when it comes to creating original product innovation, we are way behind. Take this metric like patents per capita. We are nowhere close to any of the developed countries in the world. In fact, India might even rank outside the top 100. This is not because we lack intelligence, but because we have optimized it differently. We have optimized it for selection over transformation, stability over experimentation, execution over exploration. And until that balance shift, we will continue to produce talent that succeed globally but struggle to create at mass locally. To sum it all up, India has done a lot of things right. Our education system has produced strong mathematical foundations, hardworking students, competitive resilience, a globally respected tech talent. The evidence is there everywhere. India is one of the largest producers of STEM graduates in the world. Indians form a significant share of the global tech workforce, from Silicon Valley to global enterprises. Leaders from some of the biggest companies in the world are Indians, like Sundar Pichai, Satya Nadella. And these are products of the same system. And it's not just leadership. India's IT and service sector contribute hundreds of $billions to the economy, powering global businesses across industries. Even globally, Indian professionals are known for strong analytical thinking, work ethic, ability to perform under pressure. As Narayan Murthy once said, our education system has created a vast pool of disciplined and hardworking talent. So, we're not broken, we're just misaligned because the same system that produces excellent test takers does not always produces effective problem solvers. The same system that builds global employees does not always build local creators. If this misalignment is left unaddressed, it does not just remain a gap, it becomes a full blown crisis. I would like to conclude this episode by saying if a system is designed for the 20th century and we are living in the 21st century, the question is whether or not the system worked before. It is whether it will continue to work tomorrow. Are we preparing our children to follow instructions or navigate uncertainty? Are we training our kids for memory or are we training them for judgment? Because in the world where machines can retrieve information instantly, the real advantage is no longer what you know, it is how you think. And perhaps future will not belong to those who have all the answers, but those who can ask better questions. If you value conversations like this, do consider subscribing to our channel. Now, we've understood the problem with the current education system, but this channel is not about problems. This channel is about what we can do about them. So, what does this mean for parents? It means marks alone are no longer enough. It means skills cannot be postponed until after graduation. And it means the way we prepare our children has to change early. In the next episode, we'll break this down. What should students actually focus on? What should students actually focus on? And how can we prepare our children not just for exams, but for the real world? Because the good news is this problem is solvable and we don't have to wait for the system. We can start it at home. See you in the next video.